Good afternoon, welcome. I'm Lori McCauley, Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs. It's great to see everyone. I'm just so impressed with the turnout here in person and live stream. Thank you all for joining us. If you are on the live stream and you want to participate in the interactive sessions, please make sure that you've joined via the YouTube link that you can access on the diversity.umich.edu website. So if you want to be interactive, please join us there. We are all eager to learn more about the impact of the university's first 5-year DEI strategic plan. Today, we're going to explore that in depth. We're going to also hear from our fabulous president and our wonderful vice provost for equity and inclusion about how DEI 1.0 will provide a foundation for the work that we're going to do for DEI 2.0. As provost, I believe a strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is a critical path forward for higher education. I also believe it is particularly incumbent on us as a public university to articulate why those values are crucial to a just and flourishing society. Just as crucially, we must learn to live and practice these values, both personally and institutionally. We can't be a leader in conversations about social justice and equity if we're not interrogating our own status quo and transparently, honestly working to improve. I'm proud that the Office of the Provost has been able to advance some tangible goals as part of the DEI 1.0 phase. For example, the anti-racism tenure-track faculty hiring program. As a research university, we know that scholarship from leading experts is the foundation of good policy. To that end, the anti-racism tenure-track faculty hiring program was designed to support the hire of at least 20 faculty with scholarly expertise in racial inequality and structural racism. These scholars are administratively housed across schools and colleges, working on topics like racial justice in technology, racial justice in healthcare, and advancing anti-racism through arts-based social work practice. Another example is the work in advancing public safety, a U of M task force. And this was a task force that was charged with taking a critical look at the university's public safety services with an eye towards making constructive recommendations. This was a highly successful effort where DPSS chose to move forward with a number of action items stemming from the task force recommendations, including providing policy and procedure documents to U of M Police Department Oversight Committee and working with U of M partners to track and make public data on stops, arrests, and grievances. DPSS has continued to demonstrate a serious commitment to transparency, improvement, and partnership. In addition to new initiatives and programs, we in the Office of the Provost are also striving to embed DEI principles into our processes. We are being intentional about surfacing bias and rethinking old habits in every arena, from the budget process to executive searches. One example is when we do high-level leadership searches on our campus, we now have a separate meeting with the search firm that's supporting the search that includes the provost as well as our chief diversity officer to emphasize to the search firm our university's commitment to DEI. We also review long lists and short lists of candidates to assure that there are notable commitments to DEI and ensure that our candidate pools are broad and diverse. It's really wonderful to have our colleagues in ODE sharing our space in the provost's office. It's made thoughtful collaboration about integrating DEI into policy systematically and meaningfully a much more seamless experience. Without a doubt, the infusion of DEI paradigms into our daily work wouldn't be as efficient and as much of a pleasure without the leadership of our Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer, Tabby Chavis. Tabby is a longtime faculty member and experienced leader here at the University of Michigan. She's held leadership positions at the department, college, and central administration level in her 24 years at the university. Most recently, she was the director of the National Center for Institutional Diversity and Associate Dean for DEI in LS&A. Prior to that, Tabby served as an Associate Vice President for Research, focused on supporting arts, humanities, and social science units, also as Associate Dean for Academic Programs and Initiatives in our Rackham Graduate School, and as Chair of the Combined Program in Education and Psychology. Across all of these roles, the values of DEI have been central to her leadership approaches and practices and infused throughout the initiatives and programs that she has developed or helped implement. She arrived in her current role in August of last year and has since demonstrated the same remarkable passion and vision for DEI that she evidenced throughout her career. I'll just say she's been an incredible partner to me in the Provost's office. I've truly enjoyed working with her. Please join me in welcoming our Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer, Tabby Chavis.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's been a pleasure in the short time working together to work with you and to really witness your commitment in action. Good afternoon, everyone. To those of you who are here in person and for those of you who are joining us, tuning in via live stream. I'm so excited to share with you information and a snapshot of outcomes from the University of Michigan's first DEI strategic plan. We now affectionately call it DEI 1.0, given our university leadership's commitment to a second strategic plan period, which will launch this fall. This year, our campus is planning for that next phase of our work, informed by the findings of the DEI 1.0 plan period and including community feedback. This session hopefully will contribute to your thinking and planning with each of your unit communities and provide encouragement and motivation to continue our journey. As Lori noted, I've been a longtime faculty member and administrator at U of M. Can't believe it's been 24 years. But I only took on this role of Vice Provost and Chief Diversity Officer since this past August. But a lot has happened since then. It's been a pleasure and an honor to talk with so many people from our community and to review all of our units' evaluation reports, yes, all 50 of them, and to learn about the wide range of thoughts, perspectives, and innovative activities and practices that were developed and implemented over the strategic plan period. So first, we have a lot to cover, so we're good, and I want you to engage. I'm ready to get to the conversation with President Ono and to share his thoughts with this community, so we're going to jump right into it. And first, I'll start with where we're trying to go with our strategic plan: to impact U of M, and to impact higher education and society. And by contested perspective, I'm referring to a question that has been raised and is still being raised in higher ed spaces nationally. Read the news. That is, whether colleges and universities, and in our case, major research public universities, should be focusing on these kinds of DEI issues rather than, quote, core mission, unquote. Our strategic efforts have sought to move away from that question of DEI as a contested perspective to DEI as institutional value. This move is based in our priority for academic excellence, since we now know from a pretty large body of research, including work led by our own faculty, students, and alumni, that the conditions of diversity, equity, and inclusion lead to more innovation and better problem solving. With this understanding, then we're more likely to integrate DEI into our standard operating procedures and practices as part of core mission, which is our ultimate goal. Our campus's DEI strategic planning process was unique in higher education. A priority was recognizing and honoring the decentralized structure and culture here at U of M and the resulting heterogeneity across our units. So it was important in our planning process that it was one that was both distributive to address units' unique local challenges and strengths and to draw on local expertise and knowledge, and also centrally focused to help provide support and cohesion across the different unit plans. As a result, the structure of our DEI plan had 50 major academic, administrative, and service units within the university, developing specific plans that were responsive to their own unique DEI contexts and circumstances. And university central leadership also developed a central campus-wide plan led by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or ODE, to support the 50 plans and to help oversee several university-wide programs such as the Go Blue Guarantee and Wolverine Pathways. In developing their plans, all units were asked to address 3 objectives that were universal to the U of M DEI effort. These 3 objectives are people, impacting our people, recruiting, retaining, and developing a diverse community, process, creating an inclusive and equitable campus community, and products, to supporting the innovation and inclusive teaching and education, scholarship and research, and service and engagement. Fundamentally, what the plan was attempting to do is shift the culture around DEI at Michigan. The institutional model guiding our strategic plan represents our theory of change, including key elements that we viewed as fundamental for achieving the cultural transformation we seek. It begins with raising institutional awareness around DEI concerns, opportunities, and improvement needs, including the experiences of different communities. It builds on this greater awareness by developing individual skills to work on these concerns and opportunities. At the same time, it focuses not just on individuals, but on aligning systemic policies, processes, and procedures in ways that better reflect our DEI values and goals. And sustain engagement in those efforts then create cultural norms and reinforcers that contribute to the goal of truly broadening institutional access. That is, in ways that reflect abundant representation of the groups and cultures that make up our nation and society, that promote a welcoming climate and feelings of inclusion and community for all, and that enable equitable opportunities for thriving and success. After our 5-year initial implementation process, during which units reported annually on their progress, we executed a year-long self-study evaluation process at the unit and university level. The self-study focused on both process and outcomes as part of a culture of continuous improvement in DEI. And ODE provided all units with a toolkit to support their evaluation process and provided consultation and support to DEI leads and unit teams throughout the year. The DEI strategic plan included the implementation of 37 central or university level action items and over 2,800 unit level action items. This information was also made available to the public via an annual report tracking the progress of each action item and is posted on the university's DEI website, diversity.umich.edu. This transparency also served as an act of accountability and community empowerment. Our evaluation and assessment team used a multifaceted, multi-method approach. Our analyses included examination of quantitative information such as enrollment and employment data and campus climate surveys, as well as quantitative and qualitative analyses of materials such as units curricular-related material, institutional reports, budget documents, and other materials developed during the DEI plan period. For the next part of this session, I will provide an overview of a sampling, not all the findings, we'd be here for hours, across the people, process, and products objectives, providing examples of analyses and example initiatives for each of those objectives. First, the people objective, or enhancing diversity in the representation of our community. I'll start with examination of demographic trends, and I'll start with a take-home point. Although we have work to do, we have made strides in increasing the demographic diversity of our students, staff, and faculty over the DEI plan period. With regard to racially minoritized communities, the number of people of color across tenure track and non-tenure track faculty, staff, undergrad, and grad students increased substantially from 2016 to 2021. When breaking down further to examine different minoritized groups, data patterns show that first generation, women, and all groups of color increased from 2016 to 2021 with two qualifications. First, our Black undergraduates showed a very small increase. The number of Black students on our campus has actually increased compared to 2016, but not to a degree that has kept up with the growing student body overall. Thus, Black students' percentage numbers have increased, but the percentage of total students has remained low. In contrast, our Black graduate students' numbers and percentage in the graduate space increased, suggesting the different progress in those two educational pathways. Similarly, the number of Native American undergraduates decreased, and while that percentage decrease looks substantial and it is meaningful, because the number of our Native American community was extremely low to begin with, less than 1%, this level of decrease literally reflects several students. Like Black graduate students, Native American graduate students showed a marked increase, suggesting different progress at graduate and undergraduate recruitment efforts. We're currently engaging in some focused efforts, some ongoing with one example that I'll spotlight today, and some new efforts to support Black and Native American enrollment and success, specifically, which will be central to our upcoming DEI planning and efforts. The patterns for our staff look similar, with women and groups of color increasing with the exception of our Native American staff, who represented a very small proportion of our staff population, which itself is a challenge, in addition to the impact that a few departing staff can have on our community representation. It also is important to note that staff and faculty, which I'll show in a moment, are likely to have longer tenures at the university as compared to most students. As a result, this 5-year period is a short time for impacting the total employee demographics, but we have made a difference. And significantly, the hiring of staff and faculty that occurred during the DEI 1 period was more diverse. Higher percentages of people of color were hired during this period than the percentages of people of color hired in the decade prior. And faculty also show this overall pattern that I mentioned, with increases across women and groups of color, with the exception of our Native American tenure track faculty, while Native American non-tenure track faculty increased. And I'll also note that across all of our groups, faculty, staff, and students, the 2 or more races group increased in numbers, and it increased at higher rates than the other racial ethnic categories, and it increased most dramatically for our students. Looking more closely at that category will be a focus of our efforts going forward. Currently, federally mandated practices since 2010 group all Hispanic and Latinx identified individuals as Hispanic and Latinx, including those identifying with more than one race. But for other groups, those identifying with more than one race are placed in the 2 or more category only. This means that we may not be fully describing some of the students, staff, and faculty identifying as Black, Native American, and Asian. And we don't have a way currently of describing our North African and Middle Eastern population within our available data sources. This is really important because describing, not to make excuses, because we have work to do, but describing our student population and our staff population and our faculty population with more precision will help us actually understand our campus diversity better and help us in our benchmarking of progress accurately. And again, make no mistake, even in engaging in that kind of analysis, we already know that we need to do more to recruit students, faculty, and staff across all of our minoritized groups. An example initiative focused on the people objective is the Wolverine Pathways program. This program provides year-round academic and social supports to students, families, and their schools from selected underserved communities in Michigan, starting with 7th graders through high school. The program has shown noteworthy impacts so far, with participants being over twice as likely to be admitted and almost 2.5 times likely to enroll at U of M compared to their high school counterparts. WP students also perform at a comparable or higher levels as other admitted students, and the program has decreased gaps with students from more privileged communities. It's also noteworthy that in its short time, this one program accounts for 20% of the Black in-state students entering U of M. This suggests the need to double down on efforts like this and draw on its key practices in other efforts to increase diversity in our undergraduate population. An example people initiative that focuses on faculty is our LSA Collegiate Fellows Program. This program, administered by the National Center for Institutional Diversity, focuses on recruiting outstanding early career scholars with demonstrated commitments to DEI through their research or their teaching or through their service and engagement. Fellow cohorts are supported through professional development and mentoring, and the program personnel work with departments on climate and culture issues to support retention and thriving. Since 2016, the program has recruited 47 fellows, with almost all of them completing the fellowship and entering tenure-track positions. With its approach of explicitly connecting diversity and scholarly excellence, the program yielded a strong and diverse applicant pool. Fellows are 70% women, 90% people of color, and almost 68% from underrepresented racial ethnic groups. These outstanding scholars are rising stars in their fields and disciplines across the humanities, natural sciences, and social sciences. They are highly effective researchers, teachers, and mentors, and making positive impacts to their departments in our university, and this program is a model for effective recruitment for diversity and excellence. Next, I'll move to process, which means a focus on inclusive, equitable, and welcoming environments where all have the opportunity to thrive. U of M community's perceptions of the DEI climate is one indicator of the process objective. Working with the Institute for Social Research and a third-party survey vendor, ODE administered a 2021 sampling survey to follow the initial 2016 survey at the start of the DEI period. Each campus unit was also administered a climate survey. The overall analysis pattern suggests that a substantial proportion of our U of M community view us as making significant progress as a result of DEI 1.0. A large majority, approximately 89% or more, of our students, faculty, and staff viewed our climate as similar or better than at the start of the DEI plan, while comparatively fewer viewed it as worse. Similarly, a great majority thought U of M was comparable or better than other institutions in DEI progress, with few viewing U of M as comparatively worse than others. Of note, however, is that for a number of climate indicators, for instance, satisfaction, sense of belonging, discrimination experiences, we found that consistent with 2016, minoritized groups based on gender, race, socioeconomic status, disability, LGBTQ+ identity had more negative climate perceptions than did non-minoritized or majority groups. The gap or discrepancy between minoritized and non-minoritized groups was smaller in 2021 than it was in 2016, which signals progress, but those group differences still remained. Thus, our data so far are showing both progress and point to areas of differential experience that warrant focused attention and action. Other process initiative examples focus on campus accessibility efforts. Over the past several years, our campus began to more deeply engage in a number of efforts with resources and attention to addressing physical barriers, highly rated disability awareness training, digital accessibility policies, and programs such as the Adaptive Sport and Fitness Program, among other areas. In addition, the Student Idea Board in the center there, a student-led group convened by ODE, also developed a set of recommendations that have been or are currently being implemented. These are just a few examples of activities and activism. And this is just the start and the tip of the iceberg, as our continued investments and efforts must center disability, community needs, and cultural change to dismantle ableism even more. Another process example relates to DEI skill building. Programming developed and offered during the DEI one-point plan period was taken up by undergraduates, such as bystander interventions to reduce bias incidents, inclusive teaching modules for student instructors, DEI educational programs for staff offered through organizational learning in Michigan Medicine, and faculty stride training on inclusive search practices. These types of offerings and cross-campus participation serve to enhance knowledge and skill and help build our institutional capacity for infusing DEI across our roles, our functions, and our units. Another process example is in the area of development and fundraising. This example focuses on the work of our Office of University Development. U of M has taken the unprecedented step of infusing deeply DEI into our development agenda and strategies, including dedicated staff experts. This has begun to enhance fundraising for critical DEI priorities, diversify our volunteer and donor bases, and support community-centered fundraising approaches. U of M has also taken the unprecedented step of integrating DEI into its upcoming capital campaign, another signal of DEI being connected to core mission and key priority areas. Finally, the product's distal objective focuses on infusing DEI within our educational curriculum and programming, research and scholarship, service and engagement outcomes, including infrastructure. Our evaluation analysis examined curricular engagement as one of the product's focused areas, analyzing indicators such as DEI content in course descriptions across campus, units reported curricular and pedagogical efforts, and the level of campus participation in inclusive teaching programs developed and offered for the community during the DEI plan period. Collectively, these indicators provide evidence of sustained and increasing efforts and impacts related to DEI in U of M's curricular work. I'll spotlight example initiatives reflecting units' reported curricular transformation activities. Our campus units describe numerous focused efforts to revisit their curricula, focused on both content and inclusive pedagogy. Here are just a few examples of initiatives from selected units, from inclusive research to decolonizing curricula to equity-focused teaching approaches. Units both described their efforts in their plans and provided indicators of progress and impacts of these efforts for their unit communities. Some of these efforts were initiated at the beginning of the DEI plan period, and others were revised, developed, or integrated in response to the events of 2020. The pandemic onset, which illuminated health disparities, renewed racial justice movements sparked by anti-Black and anti-Indigenous police violence, and the rise of anti-Asian and anti-Semitic hate acts, along with one of the most divisive political election seasons in modern history. And units really rose to the occasion to be able to think about ways to address and infuse scholarship and teaching and learning activities related to these areas. I also highlight product-focused initiatives related to infrastructure. Examples include employee annual review processes. All units reported the development of practices for considering DEI in faculty and staff annual review processes in some form. The Trotter Multicultural Center is another infrastructure resource, from its movement to a new building on Central Campus to its numerous programmatic offerings serving a large number of community participants. The University Diversity and Social Transformation Professorship is another resource for advancing the products of scholarship, teaching, and service. This new program was designed to recognize and honor senior faculty who have made transformative efforts in DEI, in research and scholarship, teaching, service, leadership, or other forms of engagements in their field and disciplines. A primary goal here was to attach value and prestige to areas of work and innovation that can be devalued or rendered invisible in traditional ways of evaluating faculty excellence. The program has helped support units' retention goals for senior faculty, and the program has also helped units recruit new outstanding senior scholars with DEI commitments. Currently, these professorships have been awarded across 11 of our schools and colleges to outstanding senior faculty from diverse fields and disciplines who study many topics, from engineering to gender studies, from philosophy to health sciences, among many other areas. Their DEI transformation efforts have ranged from advancing racial equity in STEM, to addressing health disparities, to policy and practice for preventing gender and sexual harassment, to supporting LGBTQ+ youth, among many areas. They are an amazing group of leaders and change makers, effective teachers and mentors, and they are active mentors and role models for earlier career scholars and students. The final example of a product-focused initiative is our DEI Leads. This group here is framed as a product in that it represents a now established and powerful infrastructure for advancing DEI across campus. U of M committed significant resources to support the campus-wide and unit-specific planning necessary for strengthening DEI across campus. This included new infrastructure such as the creation of the Chief Diversity Officer role and the reorganization of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to help units help in leading, coordinating, and partnering with our campus planning and implementation. Another key aspect of this new infrastructure was the development of DEI and implementation leads in each unit, or DEI leads. These are skilled professionals, staff and faculty who also work with student leaders, who report to their unit's leadership and help them lead and manage local DEI planning. At the same time, they regularly engage as a community and with ODE to support idea sharing and exchange and consistency and coordination across the plans. In many ways, our DEI leads have served as the connective tissue holding our complex DEI structure together. They're the heart of our plan, assets to their units and to each other, and have become an invaluable strategic structure for supporting DEI goals. The examples presented reflect only some of the many indicators of our campus efforts, innovations, and impacts. These multiple forms of data and community input help us understand our progress and continued challenges and needs. We'll have much more in a full report that will be available to our community, along with an interactive website that will follow in the days after this session, so that you can read even more examples across all of our units around efforts, activities, and impacts defined by a variety of metrics. But today I highlighted several examples. Overall increases in demographic diversity for students, staff, and faculty, with a need to intensify strategies and efforts for particular groups. Perceived progress in DEI climate by our community, generally and comparatively, but with attention to variation experiences of climate across minoritized and non-minoritized populations. Recognition and support for DEI work in scholarship, teaching, service, and engagement. Incorporation of DEI objectives into processes, procedures, and infrastructure. Inclusion of DEI-related principles in professional development resources. And active curricular engagement related to DEI across our campus. And because we're decentralized, we know that this progress looks different across different units, but we can say that all units, depending on where, regardless of where they were starting, made progress forward in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our process also highlights insights and lessons learned for how we might move forward in our processes. In the next phases of our work, I anticipate that we'll emphasize, based on lots of feedback and discussions with our community already, more strategic unit plans. Many units had long lists of activities, and more was better. Our more strategic plans may mean fewer action items, but more focused ones, focusing on those that are bold, that are most impactful, and that can be measurably tied to success. We also see that we can have more collaboration across plans. In some cases, multiple units were working on similar areas in parallel. So we must take advantage of synergies and collective resources that will not only maximize efficiency, but effectiveness and impact. Enhance infrastructure such as data and evaluation support for our units so that they can be supported in their ongoing decision-making. And for all of our units, we have to strive, despite our decentralized culture and structure, for the greatest engagement with our full campus community possible, including off-campus constituents. This means regular communication and feedback opportunities, and approaching DEI plans as living documents to be referenced and revisited as unit needs and campus needs arise. Finally, I want to thank everyone in our campus community, our alumni, our partners, our affiliates, for engaging in this journey together, this unprecedented journey not just at U of M, but in higher education. Thank you to the DEI leads and the O-Day team, with special shout outs to our strategic planning team. The thoughtful and dedicated leadership and work of so many across our campus have positioned U of M to continue progress and advance DEI cultural change. This makes us the leaders and the best? Yes. But what makes us the leaders and the best is not that we have finished it and figured it all out. There is no achieving DEI because it's an ongoing journey. What makes us leaders is our commitment to the ongoing, strategic, and evidence-driven work of addressing challenges and developing new strengths and capacities. Building on what we've done and building on what we've learned, our future is even brighter. With that, I'll thank you for your attention, and I will now turn things over to Dr. Katrina Wade-Golden, Associate Vice Provost and Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, to facilitate the next part of today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. As Tabby and our evaluation and assessment team, the strategic plan team, and we'll say more about them in a little bit here, but I'm going to move us forward in the agenda because we do want to get to the part of the conversation with our president and our chief diversity officer. But what I want to do first is we want to just stop and take a couple of questions. And at this point in the agenda, we want to just entertain a question in our live audience and also a question in the virtual space relative to anything that you've heard around the results that have been shared. So we're going to take a question from our physical audience here. So does someone have a burning question? Okay, I saw the first hand here.
Thank you for that great and amazing talk. More than 10 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the ability of colleges to use quotas and goals to achieve equity in recruiting students into their college student bodies. I'm wondering whether the university in the hiring space encounters similar legal impediments or loops that they have to work around.
Thank you for that question. It feels like the more things change, the more they say the same with what's coming down the pike and at the Supreme Court level. I would say yes, that the challenges that affected our student recruitment and enrollment opportunities, constrained, not prevented, I think have impacted our faculty space as well. One area was in perception. So I will just say I spend a lot of time talking about the legal parameters of Proposition 2 and what we can, the only few things that we can't do, but all the amazing things that we actually can do. So there's a perception that was actually kind of paralyzing to faculty search processes that Prop 2, ban on affirmative action, meant we couldn't even say the word race and gender. We couldn't do anything related to that area. And that really inhibited action in a lot of faculty searches. But we can only not do two things: hire people because of their race or gender, or give people a financial benefit because of their race and gender. That doesn't stop us from looking at, and cultivating very explicitly diverse pools. And we can have diverse hires if we don't have diverse pools. One of the programs that I mentioned explicitly engaged the criteria of commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a part of faculty hiring criteria. And that criteria set also has allowed us to recruit scholars from diverse backgrounds who are attracted to the idea that we're connecting diversity to excellence. But one of the biggest area of barrier was perception that paralyzed action. And so we had to pivot, just as we are doing now in our student space, to be more creative. We know how to get things done. If there's a rule or policy, we know how to get things done related to what we want, while also meeting the parameters of that policy. And I think that paralysis was a scary paralysis period where people had a lot of good intentions but didn't want to do the wrong thing. And now I think people are understanding that we're going to need to be more creative, and that we can be more creative than what was initially kind of communicated by design. And by doing this, and the fact that we've been practicing this and have some great models, means we're going to actually be a little bit of ahead of the curve when what is likely to be the ruling at the Supreme Court level happens, and all higher ed institutions are going to be impacted in the same way that Michigan already has. Thank you for the question.
So I'm going to move us along to an interactive component of our agenda, but before we do that, we want to make sure we take one question from the virtual space. And we have that question coming from Michaelia.
Yes. We did have a few questions from our live stream, and we wonder if you could briefly address how will we continue to support and help units that may be less successful or less far along in their plans while not stifling the innovation of leading units?
While not stifling the innovation of what? Sorry.
Leading units.
Oh. I think a really amazing part of our plan process is that it acknowledged that not all of our units were starting from the same place. So that would be in any institution where there are different units, and in this case with a decentralized culture. So I think that in this case that means that progress has to be measured against where units were starting, that we want to encourage and place accountability pressures on all of our units to make movement forward. But if you're assessing your results over a 5-year period, the units that have been working on these issues for decades and decades in a focused way are going to show different progress than units who might be at an earlier stage, and that we have to incorporate that into the way that we both do assessment and also mark indicators of high progress and high success. So I think the individualized approach with the unit leads, where there's group and individualized engagement, we want to actually provide more support for consultation for units that are at those stages where they've built awareness, for instance, that kind of stage 1 of our model, and are now wanting to engage in more skill building around DEI or policy analysis around DEI. So I think that our structure that we have really positions us to do that well, because it acknowledges the diversity of our campus units, and again, thinks about progress as in part a function of where we're starting from.
Okay, join me again in thanking Tabby for that wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, so I do want to acknowledge that we received several questions in the RSVP form prior to the event. And so what we did is we grouped these questions into thematic areas, and that fed into the information you've heard thus far, but it also fed into the engagement that you will experience with the president and the chief diversity officer. And right before we get to that, I do want to engage you in an interactive activity. So we'd like for you to get your initial impressions of the DI 1.0 evaluation report information that you just heard. And to do this, we'd like you to respond to the question on the screen. How do you feel about the information that you've just received about the DEI 1.0 evaluation findings? We invite our audience joining via live stream to also participate in this activity. Those joining us in the room and online can respond to the question by going to the URL pollev, V as in Victor.com/UMODEI185, or by texting UMODEI185 to the number 37607. Yes, so that's listed up there. And then texting the letter that corresponds to your answer. So I'll give you a minute or two for you to join and provide your answer, and the poll will populate.
There's no option for all of the above. Yeah, I can't do all those things. Yeah. I'll not look and then I'll look.
Okay, so it's looking like the poll is starting to stabilize, and it looks very encouraging in that over half feel that they are informed. And so that is a key goal of this session, to inform our campus community around our progress relative to DEI. A significant proportion feeling encouraged, and then we appreciate the individuals who feel that they need more time to process the information.
Or neutral.
So thank you for that. We really wanted to ask this question to prime your thinking about how the results of DEI 1.0 can lead to priority setting for DEI 2.0. And coming after our engagement with the president and the chief diversity officer, we're going to ask for your input one other time to give us ideas around those specific priorities. So we'll move forward now, and I want to take the time to introduce our president. So we are joined today by President, so it's going in and out. We are joined today by President Santa Ono, and Santa is the 15th president of the University of Michigan, whose work in experimental medicine focuses on the immune system and eye disease. He also is an accomplished cellist. He holds degrees for the University of Chicago and McGill University. Thank you. Now, I'd like to welcome back to this portion of the program, CDO Chavis, and I'd like to welcome on the stage our 15th president, President Ono.
Thank you. Let's see. Okay, this is working. Sure. So,
First of all, congratulations for that presentation. Congratulations to all of you for all that you've done over that period of time. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. I'm going to try to look around since my back is kind of to folks over here, so to make sure. But it's the most important that people see your face, Santa. I have a list of questions that again were prompted by the questions that people sent in beforehand, and just really want to start out with a personal perspective about what DEI means to you personally. Why is DEI important to you personally?
Well, I'll give you, maybe if you'll permit me, 2 reasons why DEI is important to me. First is a very personal perspective. I come from an immigrant family in the U.S. after being born in Vancouver and living first there when my father was a professor at UBC. We moved as a family to 2 American cities, to Philadelphia, where my father was a professor at Penn, and then to Baltimore, where my father was a professor at Johns Hopkins. And there have been some books written about our family recently, one by my brother, Ken Ono, who's a mathematician. And it talks a little bit about what life was like for us growing up as kids and in high school. And we grew up in primarily white middle-class neighborhoods, and feel very privileged to have done so. But we also experienced some systemic racism targeted at us within schools and in the neighborhoods. And so the first answer is that having been the target of racism as a kid, I know how much it hurts and how much it gets in the way of a young person or a young adult really achieving at their optimum if they're going to an institution where they don't feel welcome. So the first is a very personal perspective. And the second really has to do with what I've seen being a university leader. And I'll talk, this applies for my entire career as a university leader, but I'll talk about my most recent institution prior to coming here to Michigan, and that's the University of British Columbia. Many of you know, embarked on an effort to look at systemic racism at that university, which is a fantastic institution. This is not a criticism of that university. Systemic racism exists at every university. But I would say, for me, what really became very profoundly affecting, brought home the impact of racism to me, was looking at what happened with respect to indigenous people at that university, in that province, and the role the university played in perpetuating systemic racism. And as you know, that institution its main campus exists upon the unceded territory of the Musqueam people, and that subsequent campuses were also situated on the unceded territory of different First Nations. And I would say, and as you know, what happened was that those lands were taken through colonialization. The university was founded and established, and it's a wonderful thing that this institution exists on that land. But as you know, through the Truth and Reconciliation process, we are now aware of the harm that was caused by that. And in leading the University of British Columbia, I had a chance to get to know generations of families that have experienced systemic racism in the schools and where they can live, and the processes and the laws. And in fact, it's essentially a genocide that occurred where children, indigenous children, were actually removed from their families and educated in residential schools. And many indigenous children, many women, children are missing and murdered. So one of the first things I had to do was to come to grips with the fact that an institution I was very proud of had participated in that, not directly, but by not really intervening in what was happening and apologizing to survivors of residential schools. And so in that process of leading that institution, coming to grips with what had happened historically, but also looking at systemic racism that still persists today in institutions, but also in institutions that are, for example, in the health professions or the hospitals, where graduates of the university now work, where through a study called In Plain Sight, we were able to clearly show that systemic racism against indigenous people still exists within those hospitals. That really, to me, clearly illustrated the need for universities to take a leadership role in addressing those wrongs. So those are two reasons why these efforts are very important to me personally.
Yeah, thank you. Related to that, we know that DEI work requires institutional commitment in many ways, and one of the most important is the commitment from leadership at all levels. I'm proud, as Lori mentioned, that when we're hiring leaders in our institution now, that we are looking for evidence that they have demonstrated commitments to DEI in the history of their work as leaders. How are you committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus? And what are some of the ways that you imagine demonstrating that commitment?
Well, first of all, I'm very pleased that the DEI 1.0 has taken place. And I'm invigorated by the fact that there are DEI leads throughout the institution. And it's a very strong foundation upon which we must build. As you've said in your remarks, we have much more work to do. And as I said, that's the situation with almost every institution around the world. And so, I had a chance to actually by accident meet President Emeritus James Duderstadt today in what they call the Duderstadt Center on North Campus. And I've had a chance to read a little bit of history of what's happened at this university over decades. Not only with him, but also with Bollinger and many other people that have preceded us in this room, and some of you were with them. There were Michigan mandates, two essential plans that many of you might still remember if you've been here for some time. And if you actually look at what's happened at this institution over decades, there's been progress, there's been wins and losses and wins and losses. But one of the things I learned from studying that, what's happened here, from spending time with the Black Student Union and hearing directly from them and graduates and alumni of the institution, is that leadership matters. Leadership at every level matters. Leadership from me matters. Leadership from the provost, from you matter. But every single person in this room, beyond the DEI leads, it's incredibly important because institutions, as you say, these are living documents. We have to be committed to continuous positive momentum. And if you don't do that, then you'll take one step forward, two steps back. So it's incredibly important for me from these early days that I'm here, to clearly show that I'm behind DEI 1.0, but also to making sure that when we proceed and embark with DEI 2.0, that we do so with even more vigor and more determination and more support from me and everyone in this room. It's incredibly important.
Thank you. Building on that, and maybe a little recap of something that you already presented. One thing that I was excited and struck by when you presented your initial leadership welcome address was the ways that you were infusing DEI in the core priority areas that you were outlining as some initial steps, from the financial investments, investing in banks that support underserved communities, to the Inclusive History Project. So does that reflect already your lens that this must be a part of major initiatives that represent the core work of Michigan?
Oh, absolutely. If you think and read and talk to those who preceded me, who made those commitments to the Inclusive History Project, and by the way, I benefit from having learned from Earl Lewis, who's one of the co-chairs of that project. I have absolute faith that will be foundational to truth and reconciliation at this institution. The beginning, the cornerstone to righting the wrongs at this institution and all the parts of society that this institution connects with is being truthful about our history. It's incredibly important, because ignoring that history is part of the mirage that people would like to use as an excuse that there isn't a problem. And so it was very easy for me to recommit the commitment of my predecessors to that project. And that's a project without an end date, just like DEI is never finished, because that it will take quite a bit of time to do that analysis well. I had a chance to meet with the group that's involved in the Inclusive History Project, and they asked me the question, are you prepared as the president with what you're going to hear from us? Some of it's going to be uncomfortable. Some of it's going to be difficult for you as the president and the institution to come to grips with? And my answer was yes, because the first step has to be truth. And then from there, I have faith that this institution, the EOs that are working with me together, with you, with the leadership across the institution, that will take whatever we hear and commit to making this a better place. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, picking up on that, and your mentioning of having conversations with student groups like our BSU, and I know that you've had different conversations with our student communities to hear their perspectives. In the context of DEI, progress from our DEI efforts is often incremental, and the change can be hard to see within the traditional student lifespan. So given that, and and the students are really important and critical forces for push and tension and activism in our communities. But given the incremental nature of the work, what do you think the value proposition of DEI is for students, and how do you communicate that to students?
Well, hopefully the students who are here actually saw the data that you presented. I think the data, one of the most compelling things for me was the fact that you could see that there's a heterogeneous appreciation of the impact of DEI 1.0. Our work isn't done until the students and that proportion or percentage of individuals who haven't felt the impact, until they're convinced that they feel the impact of the work. I read the Detroit News today, and there are comments there from the Black Students Union, and they are profoundly important to me, because if you read the comments, what you hear is, we believe a lot's going on, but we want to feel it ourselves.
Yes. Yep.
And that has to be our top priority, is for the students and faculty and staff of the institution not to see a number of things happening, but to feel more included. That's the litmus test that we have really made an impact. And so our work is not done until those students respond and say, we feel the impact. And it's like that interactive histogram there. Our work is not done until that proportion, that bar about I need to process it or I'm not sure, goes down. And so, don't get me wrong, coming from other institutions, I'm really proud of what's been done. But I also feel that the data show, the interactive data, and also from talking to the students, that we have much more to do. And so what would I say to the students who are saying this is incremental? I would say, let's work together. One of the things that's really magical about what's happened in my first few months here, and you didn't arrive in your role, you've been here a long time, but didn't arrive in your role that much longer than I did. But I got to tell you, one of the things that I really gives me optimism about the future is that when we received a document from the BSU, which I agree with 100%, their suggestions, their recommendations, their concerns, their frustration, I understand it all. But the good thing is that we sat down together. And let's take each of your different recommendations and let's work together to really make progress. Because that's going to be important. For far too long, this is my opinion, you can take it or leave it, what happens in institutions is that students express a concern. Then the administration goes away and puts together a committee and thinks about it in isolation from the students. And then time goes by, and then obviously, because you said students actually graduate, they're not here that long. They don't actually see the work and the effort and progress. The fact that this is a new way of working together, to include them, to brainstorm with them, to use their energy, their urgency, to really inspire us to do the best that we can do, is the way we should do things. I'm happy about that. And I hope that moving forward with DEI 2.0, we do more of that.
Yeah, thank you. I guess reflecting on what you've heard today and what you've reviewed and what you've been learning in your community engagement so far, what things are striking to you, or particularly striking to you about what you heard today around the findings? Anything that you're particularly struck by or proud of? We talked about the student experiences a bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very impressed by the progress that has been made by Wolverine Pathways and the Michigan Promise. I think the data that I've seen, I want to look at them even more closely, clearly show that those are impactful. And so what I'd like to see, to answer your question, moving forward, is to build upon that. As you said, in 2.0, there are two opportunities. One is to be more focused and bold with the priorities that we set in 2.0. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you said was to incentivize more synergy between units within the decentralized structure. And so those are two things that clearly work. And if you look at the data, there has been progress, in some cases incremental, in some cases more profound, mm-hmm. but we know that works. And those pathways to a number of different jurisdictions can be scaled up. And obviously it's going to take more work, it's going to take more resource to do that, but it's our responsibility to do so, because if not us, who will? And so hopefully that answers your question. That's what impresses me, and I'd love to see during this engagement process with the entire community that we really arrive at those bold, new, and sometimes continuing efforts to continue to make the progress that we've seen with 1.0.
Thank you. And I guess I want to wrap up by just hearing from you about, you mentioned one of your success indicators is fewer people feeling uncertain on the poll, but more broadly, what does future success look like in this next phase of our 2.0 work for you? Is there a particular thing that you want to get accomplished? What would it look and feel like to feel like we've moved forward even more powerfully and more vigorously, as you mentioned?
It's not, I guess I wasn't clear. It's not so much, I did say fewer people being uncertain. What success for me will be when fewer faculty, staff, and students respond that they see lots of things happening, but they don't feel included and welcome and equal. Mm-hmm. You know, the most painful thing I hear from faculty, staff, and students is when they say they feel they don't belong. So we have work to do at all institutions with the culture, and I believe we can do so. I believe I'm emboldened. I'm energized by the progress that has been made, and I can't wait to work with all of you to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, with that, I really want to thank you, Santa. I'm proud to be working with you and so excited to see you engage with our community as we co-construct this next stage of our process together. Please join me in thanking President
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. So I got a note to not touch the mic, and you saw I did not touch the mic, and it did not work. But the handheld works. So I just want to thank President Ono and CDO Chavis for that wonderful engagement. How wonderful is it to have our leaders really be dialed into our efforts forward. So we are so appreciative for that, because leadership must be visible and vocal if we are to be successful in our efforts. So in these last few minutes, we want to turn our attention to next steps. And CEO Chavis talked about the launch of our DEI Evaluation 1.0, or DEI 1.0 Evaluation Report website, which will launch this Friday. It will be inclusive of a full-scale report The website is a full-scale report, and also the full climate surveys will also be, you will be able to access those things on Friday as well. But we want you to stay connected. And so you can stay connected by going to diversity.umich.edu, and there you can find your unit level information, such as your unit DEI leads, and also sign up for our DEI newsletter. We want you to be engaged as well. So if you go to that same website and do /DEI2, you'll get information about a number of upcoming engagement opportunities that President Ono talked about that are coming up in February. Because we are in the planning year, and we want to build out those more strategic, more bold, robust plans for DEI 2.0, but we need your help. We need you engaging with your DEI leads in your schools, in your colleges, in your units. We need your perspective for what the priorities need to be. So we want you to stay connected in that way. So the next slide represents, and I know this looks like something from our ophthalmologist here, but please know that we will be sharing the slide deck in its entirety with all the attendees and the campus community. But I just wanted to create just a schematic for you to follow in terms of how we're engaging the DI 2.0 planning year. So starting in June, we engaged with all 50 planning units in a one-day retreat where we talked about 1.0 and what the way to 2.0 should look like. And so we've really been encouraging them and giving guidance during our DI leads meetings on what it means to have more strategic plans. And we're starting a series around, having the appropriate types of metrics so that we can track our success. That'll be starting in January. But we are in the planning phase. So the fall was a time to get your perspective, and we know that many units held engagement opportunities for you to give your input. We understand that that's still taking place in the front part of the year, hence the February sessions that we will hold. But units are actively writing their plans now. And so those plans will be due into O-Day on May 15th. So don't wait. Make sure that you are engaging with your units because, again, your perspective matters for our efforts and our success forward. And then over the summer, we will be analyzing those plans and reviewing those plans for content to make sure that they're hitting all the appropriate vital strategies, and they also will undergo a legal review in time for our launch into DI 2.0, which will come in the fall of 2023. So next, what we want to do is when you came into the room, you had a card and a pencil on your chair. So please locate that card and that pencil. You're probably sitting on it if you don't see it. So on that card, we want you to respond to the question that is on the screen. What is one thing you would want the university to focus on in DI 2.0? What is one thing you would want the university to focus on in DI 2.0? So we'll give you a couple minutes to write that down. And then before you leave, we want to invite you to post those cards on the tack boards that are in the front of the room, and we will collect those and take that information under serious advisement. And while you're doing that, if you could, next slide, please. So we'll give you a couple minutes for that. And for those of you joining the live stream, please also take a moment to answer the question and post it to our virtual tack board. We put in a lot of effort to be inclusive, so we want your perspective as well, those joining us over live stream. Okay, so as we close out our time together today, I just want to say again, echo the words of thanks to everyone in our community, our partners, and I specifically want to acknowledge the strategic plan team. I always describe our team as small and mighty, and if you can stand up, Michaelia, Dennis, Tyne Lucas, and John Rodriguez, thank you for your efforts. We also want to acknowledge the evaluation and assessment team. Is Felicia Webb, Sam Droter, and Philip Amara, and there are others. And then our communications team, Mike Moreland, led by, can you stand up, Mike? And we have Hillary, Elise, and Annette, if you could stand. And then we also have the support of UDE, University Development and Events. We appreciate your help, and they're all around the room helping to make sure that this event goes off without a hitch, so thank you for that. And then, of course, Michigan Creative, our partner in the construction of our report and our website. We're ever so grateful. And last, but certainly not least, I see many represented in the room today, our DEI Leads community. Let's give it up for the DEI Leads. Thank you for all your efforts. You are definitely the lifeblood of this process. So with that, we'll end our time together. Please do put your ideas on the board, and until next time.